Welcome to the Shudder. This is a story that came from a guy that lives in Florida now, but this happened when he lived in Mississippi. I talked to this guy on the phone 2 years ago. I wrote this experience down and sent it to Cam at Dixie Cryptid about a year and a half ago. And he told it on there, and he did fantastic with it. Now, I've told this story on Storytime, and I wasn't going to bring it to the Shudder, but it's just too good not to be in the Shudder collection. So after this, I'm going to be working on a long video, at least an hour, maybe 2 hours of nothing but roadside Bigfoot sightings. So they're really short, but there's so many of them out there. I think they'll be good in a video altogether. But this is a great story, and though you might have heard it, it's well worth hearing again. Okay, grease that squeaky chain on that porch swing and settle in. It's not often that I'd go out of the house late, but this night I had no choice. I was out of cigarettes and had no plans on having a nick fit all night. I'd been sitting at the bar drawing plans for work. I'm an electrical engineer, and late nights at the bar drawing is the norm for me. When I headed out the door, I noticed the dogs weren't around. Irish wolfhounds are big, but my two like to lay under my truck, so I'm always looking around for them to check so they don't get run over. I didn't see them anywhere, so I figured they must be off being dogs and didn't think much of it. I lived on the edge of a small town with 600 acres of thick pine forest out my back door. Several creeks ran through there, and there was always some animal close to the house for the dogs to run off or get sprayed by. I didn't see anything as I got into my truck, and I headed to the service station to stock up on smokes for the week. My driveway was pretty long, just short of half a mile to the road, with a fence running down either side. I was driving back toward the house from my cig run when I first saw it. I didn't know exactly what I had seen, but it was big and black and ran in front of my truck just far enough that I could only make out that it was big and black. My first thought was bear, because of the size, and it was apparently running on all fours. The only problem is, bears of any kind just aren't seen in this part of Mississippi, unless it had escaped from a zoo somewhere or was just way out of place and lost. After scratching my head and driving the other quarter mile or so to the house, the thought of a bear in the area weighed heavy on me. I pulled into my usual place and got out of the truck and started up to the house. When I got to the steps, I could hear my dogs whimpering under the porch. I had never seen them act this way, as they were usually the boss of the yard. I thought they must have seen the bear and thought better of trying to boss it out of the yard. Before I could get the door open, the dogs were out from under the porch and inside, almost knocking me down getting in. I shut the door and peeked out the window. A floodlight on the side of the house dimly lit the front yard, just enough that I could see if anything was around. I saw nothing and proceeded to round up the dogs to stash them in the garage till morning. If a bear was around, I wasn't putting them back out for the night. I got them settled after a long dragging match just to get them out the kitchen door. I was ready for a smoke. I never smoked in the house, so I headed to the front porch to light up and get my fix before another long night at the bar. I opened the front door, and the most awful smell hit me right in the face. It was strong and smelled like strong urine and horrible body odor. I thought this must be the bear. I scanned the yard and tree line to see if I could spot the culprit, but didn't see anything. I kept a 12-gauge automatic by the door, loaded up with double-aught buckshot for intruders or whatever might try to get in. I reached inside and grabbed the gun, leaving the door open as I pulled on my cigarette and continued scanning left to right. I noticed what looked like a dark figure against the corner of the house to my right, about 30 feet away, but it was just dark enough that it could have just been a shadow and my mind playing tricks. I am looking for a bear after all. Still, I squinted as much as I could, trying to see if it was anything at all, when I heard a loud pop come from behind my truck to the left. I took a step forward with my 12 gauge at the ready and scoured the area, but saw nothing. About halfway through with my cigarette now, I looked back over to the shadow at the corner of the house, and it was gone. A chill ran down my spine. A cold sweat soaked my brow as the worst feeling of dread came over me. There was no way that was a bear. It was too tall. Now, I've never been one for the paranormal. I always thought ghosts and Bigfoot are just strong imaginations and people scaring themselves. The feeling I was experiencing was new and strong, but still, rational thought and skepticism took over, so my false sense of security could reign once again. Before I could take a second step into the house, it screamed. I just froze in place while this ungodly sound permeated the house. It was a loud, high-pitched roar, like a lion on steroids. I had never felt or heard anything like it. I could feel it in my spine and chest, and every organ in my body was vibrating. At the same time, the poor dogs were scratching at the kitchen door, whining desperately to get into the house. I broke free from my paralysis, slammed the front door, and headed for the kitchen door to let them in when the first hit happened. Boom! The house shook like a truck had slammed into it. I hurried to let the dogs in. Another scream, this time seeming louder and longer and coming from the front porch. Boom! Boom! 2 more hits. Pictures and paintings were falling off the wall. Another scream from the back of the house and another hit. Boom! I realized then there was more than one, and they were very upset. I wanted to call the police, but I left my cell phone in the truck on charge, and I wasn't about to go get it now. I didn't know what else to do, so I sat in the hall in the center of the house, soaked in fear, clenching my 12 gauge with 2 huge Irish wolfhounds cowering behind me. I knew for sure there were at least 3. They would run across the roof of the house, stomping so hard I just knew they were destroying my roof. The screams and hits continued for several hours, and then they just stopped. I'm not sure when I fell asleep, but I never moved from my position in the hall. Neither did the dogs. I awakened at around 10:30 the next morning. My mouth felt like cotton. My body ached, stove up from the tension of being afraid. The dogs were sitting by the front door, waiting to be let out. I knew the attackers were gone. I opened the door, and the dogs ran out quickly. I walked out onto the front porch, still holding my gun. As I made my way around the house, the bright sunlight revealed the damage that it had sustained. I had that house built 6 years earlier. It was a half-brick, half-cedar dream home with a porch that wrapped around the front and one side. 6 feet of the brick ledge by the back bathroom was on the ground. The cedar planks above it were pushed in and split all the way to the roof. What looked like footprints, 18 to 20-inch impressions, permeated the ground all around, and handprints the size of dinner plates dotted the cedar siding. Every corner of the house was damaged. Azalea bushes were pulled out of the ground and thrown onto the roof. Shingles were scattered all over the yard and even some on my truck. Whatever did this was not playing, and I had no doubt that if they wanted in, it would have been as easy as breaking into a paper bag. I packed up and moved to a hotel that day. I've since repaired the house, claiming vandalism on my insurance, and sold it to an older couple a few months later. Several families wanted it, but I just couldn't bring myself to sell it to anyone with kids. For whatever reason, those creatures decided to attack that night. I couldn't bear the thought of children living through that horror. I did tell the couple that bought the house of the incident, but they didn't seem to care much. I'm not sure they even believed me. It wasn't anything more than vandals to them. It's been 5 years now, and the thought of that night still rushes upon me from time to time. I used to drive by the house now and then to see if the older couple was still there and to make sure everything was still okay, and it was, and they were. I now live in the city in another state. I have a wife and a 3-year-old boy. I now do armchair research on Sasquatch from the safe confines of our condo, and I'm convinced that's what attacked our house that night. I don't know what I did or if the dogs did something to them, but I haven't been back in the woods, and I'm not sure if I ever will, but there's no doubt that night will haunt me for the rest of my life. That story gets me every time. In my mind, it's a stiff reminder that you just can't trust these creatures. There just seems to be a level of tolerance, and if you cross that line, they're going to let you know. Now, I'm not sure if it was something he did or the dogs. I'm guessing the dogs did something, but they weren't happy. Someone suggested it was Dog Man when I told it before, but I don't know. They could be right. Brian told me he thought it was Skunk Ape, so that's how I labeled it. But I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider hitting that thumbs up, and if you subscribe, make sure you hit the notification bell so you can join me here next time for the Shudder.